Hey everybody, it's Lauren here. You know, the holiday season's finally passed and so is 2020. And maybe over the last 30 days or so, you were out looking at Christmas lights with your family, and occasionally you'd come across those amazing displays that had the lights synchronized to music, and it was just so loud and over the top. Or maybe all of your friends kept sending you that TikTok video that was filmed at Irwin Family Lights of the two Christmas trees arguing back and forth between each other. And you kind of got inspired and thought to yourself, you know, maybe this is something that I want to try to do for next year. Well, if that's the case, we're going to put together a video series kind of taking you from the pre-planning stage, which is very important actually, through what kind of equipment to get, how to build everything yourself, how to get that music to work with the lights, and then how to set everything up. And we hope that you'll enjoy this series and stick around. All right, so some of the things we're going to cover: overall cost of putting on a show, finding out if your neighborhood is right to do a show, seeing all the different pieces that you would like to put into your show and how you like to make it look. We'll cover some information on some vendors, props, the lights that are out there, and controllers. And then we'll finish up part one with where do you go to get help, before we continue in a couple of weeks with part two, which will take all of this information that you're going to collect and put it into use designing your show and all the different things you need to purchase and buy or build to get that show going. So cost, that's the big one, really. Everyone always wants to know what's it cost to put on a light show like that. And the price can vary depending on a lot of different factors. For instance, how much hands-on and DIY you want to get into this project, or how much do you want to have that's already pre-built and ready to go. That can be a huge factor, driving the price either up or down. But typically the average is going to be anywhere from 75 cents to $1 per pixel. The pixels themselves even range in price depending on if you get in a pre-buy sale, which usually happens the first couple of months at the beginning of the year, is where you're going to find some of those vendor sales on lights. But your lights are going to range anywhere from maybe 18, 19 cents per pixel to as high as 22 to maybe 25 cents per pixel, depending on the time of the year and the type of pixel that you're purchasing. But besides that, you have to get controllers. Then you have to get wire and Cat5 cable and pigtails, power supplies, props to put everything into if you're not going to make the props yourselves. Everything you're going to need to build one of those mega trees, you know, different mounts depending on the types of siding you have on your house. You're going to need zip ties, and a lot of them. I probably went through over 1,000 zip ties at least my first year. You're going to need tape, tools you never thought you'd ever need, solder sleeves and shrink wrap to make repairs, pipes, whether it be metal or PVC, to mount things on. You're going to need a show controller to run your show, perhaps, or use Xscheduler, which is a free program. You're going to need to buy your music for all of your sequences, and perhaps even purchase sequences or join a sequence club through a membership program. And of course, I also recommend donating a little bit of money to the Xlights organization, because they do all the work behind the scenes creating the Xlights software, which is how we're able to run everything. So that's kind of all the different pieces that are going to go in there, which is why there's such a variation in what it's going to cost. My first year out of the gate, I had a little over 4,500 lights, and it ran me close to $3,000. So I was right at that lower end of that 75 cents per pixel range to get my show up and get it running. But I also, just because it cost you that much the first year, if you plan ahead and do your planning correctly, it should cost you less next year if you're going to expand. I plan on doubling my show size, and I won't have to include things like controllers and a lot of the different wires and tools, because I already have all that stuff. So it will be a significantly less cost per pixel in year two to follow. Is my neighborhood right? It's a fair question to ask, and the reason I really bring it up, I mean, every neighborhood really is good for a light show, you would think, but sometimes things pop up that you wouldn't even think about. If you happen to live in a neighborhood that's maybe governed by a homeowners association, there could be rules within your covenants that state you can't have a light show. So that's something to look into. I know some HOAs have rules that lights can only be up for a certain amount of time, and then they have to come down, whether it's a 20-day window or a 30-day window or pre-holiday and so many days after a holiday. You got to look into that. There was numerous posts on the forums about people who had their shows shut down because of such things. One in particular, I remember reading where their rule for their HOA was that you could only have lights up for 30 days. And they put their display up just before Thanksgiving, the weekend prior. Well, come a week before Christmas, the HOA gave them notice that they needed to turn their display off or be fined. So that's something to think about. Some cities even have rules in place when it comes to lights or light pollution. So you need to think about that. The other thing you have to look at too, is there room for traffic on my street? You know, the picture I put up there in the top left corner, that's a bad street to try to have a light show on if that traffic's there the whole time during a light show, because a light show is going to bring traffic in and people are going to want a place to park where they can see your show. So those are things you need to really think about. Another thing to kind of help with that, if you are in kind of a tight situation, is maybe not being so, I don't want to say don't post that you have a show, but don't go over the top looking for your show to go viral. Because if your show goes viral, that could maybe negatively impact the ability to even run a show. Too much traffic coming to your neighborhood, where you now have to either limit the show hours or the days that you run the show, because you have neighbors and maybe they're not happy about every day coming home from work. It takes them hours to get home because there's a lot of traffic coming down your street. So those are some things to think about. Think about your neighbors. How's the show going to affect them? You know, have you talked to them? Let them know what's going on. It's always good to let them know ahead of time you're planning on doing something like this. Most neighbors, for the most part, are pretty good with this. I'm lucky where I live. I'm in an HOA myself, but we actually have a light show every year in a contest. So it's encouraged in our neighborhood. So I don't have to worry about anything like that. So how do you want your show to look? That's the big question. And you should have some kind of idea by now. That's why you're watching this video. But, you know, take some time and go out there and watch a few other YouTube videos. See what in those particular shows that sparks your interest, whether it's a mega tree or maybe the arches you love, or someone's got candy canes or snowflakes all over the place. You need to take note of what you like. And I recommend keeping track of it either in a notebook or maybe a folder on your computer or an Excel spreadsheet, whatever is your favorite way of keeping track of stuff. And make note of everything you like, whether it's even certain effects on particular displays you want to keep track of, or a certain sequence that you saw someone do, or a song that resonated with you that you would like to do. Take down as much information as you can to use that when you start planning how you're going to lay out your particular show. And if you have questions about that particular show that you saw, whether it was on a Facebook post, in one of the forums that are out there for us, or on the YouTube video itself, ask a question in the comments. I'm sure if you had a question about what size is that tree, or how many pixels, or who sequenced that song, they'd be more than happy to provide that information for you. That's the nice thing about this community. We really are all about helping each other figure out how things work and what works best. You know, and if it was a sequence, find out if they created it themselves, or was it a free one that they downloaded and modified to fit their particular layout, or did they buy it from one of the vendors that are out there? Those are all good questions to ask as you move forward in the planning stage. And once you kind of have a good idea of what you want to do, then that's when you want to go out and take a picture of your house. And from multiple angles, you want to do that. I mean, you can see in the bottom picture, my house is in a cul-de-sac. And so there's lots of different areas around the circle where people can park to view our show. The negative side about our show is our front yard is very small. It's only about 18 feet wide in the front, and it goes to about 24 feet in the back end of the grass. It's a very small plot to put things on. So for our first show, and I recommend this also, we didn't want to go super big. It's better to go small and expand over the years. This hobby takes time and takes a little bit of money. And if, not saying that we haven't seen people put a 10,000 pixel display up in a matter of a month and a half, it can be done, but it'll be a lot better if you just take your time and slowly progress. I started planning mine in February the first year, and by the time Halloween rolled around, I was ready to do a Halloween show, which was how I tested everything out. And that's the other thing to think about too, is are you going to do both a Halloween and a Christmas show? If so, you're going to probably want to do two different layouts depending on what kind of props you'd like for the particular holiday. So for this is my Christmas layout I had for my first year, and I wanted to do 4 arches, 4 feet wide arches, which I found on a vendor's website. And I couldn't go any bigger than that because they had 6-foot ones, but that would be 24 feet wide, which is too wide for the front of my yard. I didn't want to do 3 because music is in a tempo. It's usually 4 beats, and it's kind of good to think that way a little bit when you're planning some of your props too. I wanted to do a mega tree in the yard, and I wanted to do my window outline and my eaves, some icicles, and the pillars actually are going to be matrix, where it's going to be solid lights on all of the pillars. So that was my plan for the first year when I initially made my plan and laid everything out. The other thing really to look at once you get that all done is then you need to go and measure everything. Every line around the garage and the windows, the doors, the pillars, the eaves. You need exact measurements so you know how many lights you're going to buy, because typically you will insert these into props or drill holes into props that you make yourself in either 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch increments, sometimes 4, but most of the lights standard size is 4-inch spacing. So it's usually typically 3 or less. And spacing depends on how close your display is to the viewing area. If you're relatively close like me, I'm 30 to 50 feet away, depending on the front of the back of the yard, to the street where people can view my display. And so that's relatively close. So I did 2-inch spacing on everything, and it looked really good to do that. And then you need to also figure out what type of material you'll need to mount items on. So take note, or do I have brick? Do I have stucco? For me, I've got vinyl siding. I have metal window trim. And then I've got wood. So I had 3 different surfaces I was going to be mounting on, and I had to figure out different ways to mount things. Also, how are you going to mount things in the yard? Is another thing to think about also. And that's going to bring us to lights, props, controllers, and vendors. And we're going to start out really with the lights. There's a lot of variables when it comes to lights in the Pixel world. And basically, these aren't your typical LEDs that you can pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart. These are smart pixels. And the reason they're smart pixels is because not only in each bulb is a computer chip, but also each bulb contains a red, a green, and a blue diode, thus the term RGB. This allows you to create any color that's imaginable. And if you look at the normal color palette, there's 255 shades of blue, of red, and of green. Multiply those all together, and that gives you about over 16 million different color combinations that are possible with these lights. 3 main styles of lights. There are a few other variations, but the 3 main ones are square, bullet, or strip. Strip being the stepchild of the lighting hobby, I would say, according to a lot of conversations that are out there. And the reason you would use one form over another, when it comes to the square or the bullet, there are some props that typically work better with the square. And if you're buying props from a vendor, make sure you read their description, and they'll state right in it, this is made for a bullet pixel or a square pixel. Some people like the square pixels where they can strap them and zip tie them on top of like PVC lines, so they have lines. Well, you can't do that with a pixel bullet because it's a long square, but the square ones are flat on the back and lie good on PVC. So that's kind of some uses for that. Strips, the reason some people tend not to like strips, some people have never had an issue with them, but they tend to break a little bit easier. They're a little fragiler, as well as if something does break, they're a little more difficult to repair. It's a little more precise when it comes to the soldering on a strip, where with the Pixels, they're wired. You cut the wire, cut out the bad pixels, solder in a new one, put some shrink wrap sleeves around them, and you're good to go. So that's the main difference there. As far as voltage, 5 and 12 volt are the two main forms of voltage that we use. And the real difference between the different voltages, the more the voltage is, the longer the run of pixels you can have before you need to inject power, or what we call power injection. And I will make sure and put a link to a video about power injection that they did on the Existential series, which covers power injection and how you can go about doing that. Typically, for 5-volt pixels, you can do runs of about 100 before you start to see some color fade after that and need to either inject power or start a new line completely. With 12-volt pixels, you can go 200 to 300 easily before you need to do the same process. When it comes to regulated or resistor style pixels, that's been a big debate this year. I do resistor pixels for my display, and it's kind of a technical topic, and I'll put a link to Ken from Wired Watts did a fantastic little write-up on his website about the difference between regulated and resistor pixels. So I recommend you click on the link in the description to go there and read a little bit more about that, so you kind of understand the difference between those two. And then when it comes to standard lengths or custom, that's the nice thing. Typically, standard lengths are going to be strands of 50 or 100, and not all props are made with 50 or 100. Some props are 96, some props are 112. There's all kinds of odd little combinations, but most vendors will do custom lengths for you if you need them, which is really nice. Maybe you want to do a mega tree with it's going to be 140 lights per strand. You could have strands of 140 lights put together. It would cost you a little bit more, but that's why you're paying for the customization. And then when it comes to connectors on the lights, there are 3 main connectors. There's Paul's, Ray's, and then there's X-Connect. X-Connect typically is the new standard that everybody uses. I unfortunately started out with one of the other ones, so I will continue to use that connector unless I have to completely redo all of my lights. At that point, then I'll think about switching to X-Connect. But if you're just starting out, go with X-Connect. You can't go wrong with that. And as far as props, that's the fun thing about this hobby. It's DIY. You can make anything you want and put lights into it, and just model it yourself in Xlights, and you're good to go. That's the nice thing. And that's where you can really save some of the money, is making your own props. You can 3D print stuff. There's plenty of plans for some of the 3D printing models out there. If you have a 3D printer, you can print up anything you can imagine. You can also convert some of your old props. Maybe they were just regular LEDs, dumb LEDs as we call them. Put smart LEDs in them, give them some new life. I know someone took that Joy lettering that was sold at, I believe, Lowe's, totally redid it with smart pixels. It was a phenomenal prop when they got done. It was an outstanding job. And then there's tons of Coro out there. You can cut your own Coro. You can buy sheets of Coro, and that's corrugated plastic cardboard, basically. And you can cut out your own, but there are plenty of vendors out there that work with this product with machines that cut it beautifully. Just about anything that's Christmassy that you can imagine, or Halloweeny, they make, and you can put lights into them and make them look phenomenal. When it comes to controllers, there are several different options out there, but Falcon or Cult boards are the 2 main boards in the industry. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. They both will make your pixels dance to music, which is what we all want. You can go to some companies out there too and buy ready-to-run controllers already put together inside a box with power supplies and wires, ready to go, where you just plug in your pixels. Or you can build your own by sourcing out different products from different vendors and building them and saving money, which is how you lower that overall cost per pixel price that I talked about earlier in this video. As far as vendors go, they cover just about anything you can imagine that you're going to need for this hobby. And I highly recommend utilizing them. They will save you a lot of time. They may cost you a little bit more money, but time is valuable and time is a precious commodity. And I believe hands down in using them and supporting the community through this. When it comes to lights, you can get lights. Multiple companies do that. Multiple companies sell corrugated product. There are several different vendors out there that strictly work in the 3D printed world, whether it's making smaller props or mounts or clips for the props that we're going to hang. There are hardware vendors out there, people that sell mega tree toppers for our mega trees, all the way from a 16 strand to 96 strand giant mega trees, as well as some of them even have complete kits. Some companies and vendors strictly work on the enclosures and the different types of plexiglass pre-cut to build your own boxes with. And then there are vendors out there that do the sequencing. And they really are, for me, a big time saver. Sequencing takes a lot of time. Yes, it's fun to do. I was only able to sequence one or two of my own. But these vendors that do this for a living, that's all they do. And their sequences are beautiful, and they range from very inexpensive to a little more high end. Some of the sequencing companies out there actually have memberships that you can join. And when you do that, you get so many sequences a year, plus all kinds of tips and trick videos and tutoring on how everything works. And I highly recommend looking into one of those. So where can I go to get more help? Well, there are a lot of options out there. Facebook is a big source for most of us. There are more groups than I could even list here, but some of the main ones I visit a lot is the official Xlights support group is one of them. I like to spend a lot of time on Extreme Sequence Syndicate's page. Holiday Light Think Tank is another great one. Falcon Player is a good one, and I could go on and on. They all have valuable information. If there's something specific you're looking for, generally you can type it in the search box and find exactly the answer that you need. If you don't, post the question and someone will be there within moments to give you an answer to what you need. That's the nice thing about these groups. YouTube, endless resources there. I highly recommend spending some time looking through some of Jeff's videos that he's put together on Can a Spader Christmas. Remarkable job. He was a great resource when I first started out, as well as Keith Wesley. He does an Xlights for Beginner series. I highly recommend spending some time there. And of course, we'll start building our video resources as we move forward when it comes to that point in time. Xlights.org. That's where you can not only download the Xlights software to help you program your lights, but on there they have a great link for their extensions series that they do. Lots of videos, years worth of videos there. You name the topic, you can find it there. There's also a good user guide. And as always, Xlights has a Zoom room. It's open every day, but on Wednesday nights from 7 p.m. Eastern time until whenever the cows get up in the morning. There's usually people there doing a special presentation once a week. So highly recommend you spend some time with that. Well, that concludes part one of this two-part series on planning your build. If you liked it, please think about giving us a like and sharing on your social media. Part two should come out in about 2 weeks, so to make sure you don't miss it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell notification to make sure you're updated when the new video comes out. Should be about 2 weeks, but in the meantime, if you need something to watch, we've got one of our older videos linked up right over here. And then some homework for you guys. Keith Wesley does a wonderful series on the beginning use of Xlights. And we'll have that one right over here. And we really want you to take a look at that over the next couple of weeks, because being able to use Xlights will help us as we move forward into the second phase of planning the build. So with that all said, we hope to see you next time and have a fantastic day.